What's up? Welcome to Chavez Loud, Chavez Proud Podcast. Today I'll be your host, Harrell Bennett, and joining me today will be,
Mr. Hooks, Chavez, 8th, ninth grade, world history, U.S. history, social studies.
and to discuss ideas, opportunities, and strategies when it comes to crime and gun violence in the DC metropolitan area. So, Mr. Hooks, tell us a little about yourself and what you do. What's your job?
I am in the history department at Chavez. I've been teaching at Chavez for the last 2 years, going on three. I'm a graduate of Cesar Chavez, class of 2013. Went to Chavez Middle School and high school. End up at Tennessee State University. Graduated from there in the College of Business. Went to New York. Started teaching through Teach for America, and just returning to DC and decided to bring my talents back to my alma mater, my high school, Cesar Chavez.
Right. So the first question I would like to ask you, as in, that pertains to crime rate in DC, is just how do you feel personally about the overall crime rate in DC going up by 25% from last year? Bear in mind, in 2022, the total crime rate was about around 10,000. And in 2023, it was now, you know, 1,300. So it's like, according to the Metropolitan Police Department, mind you, how do you feel about
Yeah, one, just I think the numbers increasing is always like, for me, it's like not feelings of like it's a trepidation, right? It's not
that?
feelings of fear, but there is some concern because I think in DC, the one thing you can see in DC is like the impact of crime and the impact that it has on people.
Hmm.
So for me, there are periods or places in my experience growing up here and living here now as an adult where I see certain things that don't look like I would want to, like, live
Right.
or hang around certain parts of
No,
DC.
of course, of
And
course.
then you hear about the stories. So like for me, I get feelings of anger.
Right.
Sometimes it really breaks my heart. Most times because I recognize that there are people who I know
Hmm.
that are involved in some of the criminal activity.
Right.
But also it encourages me to show up every day for my kids. It's like, yo, there's purpose in the work that I do, in teaching and transforming the mind, because I know the options and I know kind of where the culture of crime in this city will lead people. I know how easy it is to fall into it. So a couple of different emotions. I think it's real complex. I think being from here, it's hard. It's like, yeah, we want solutions, and I feel like we've been crying and arguing for solutions for a very long time, and when you don't see them immediately, it's definitely a wrestle.
I definitely have to agree with you on that, but I also, as to how I feel, at least coming from this, I look at
Yeah.
it like it's also on us to make these solutions
Mm,
because while we are sitting there crying about it, we aren't exactly doing nothing to, you know, hinder or help the problem. So I definitely think after a certain point we gotta take accountability for ourselves and us here because we gotta really work on us before anybody else gonna look at us and be like, oh, they don't want it, they don't want that help. So I definitely feel like it's a us thing too. It starts with us, definitely.
yeah, and we could be candid here, right? I can throw some questions back at you.
Of
All
course.
right, good, good, good. Because like I'm just thinking, like when you say us, right?
Okay.
Are you talking about like the young people?
Yes,
Because
young
that's
people.
who is really getting a lot of the blame, honestly. Like young people, your generation, I guess,
Of
are getting a
course.
lot of the blame for like why the crime rates are increasing. And I
Mm,
guess you've seen some of the numbers, and I don't know how
definitely.
truthful that is, or if the like narrative, the storylines are skewed, and just blame is
I
going on young
definitely
people.
feel like in terms of statistics, there might be some that are higher and some that are lower than what they actually are. But just going off of it just happening in general, it's definitely with my generation, my age group, teenagers, young adults, it's definitely resulting in a lot of us because
Mm,
we're doing the most, crazy stuff all the while and out stuff. I mean, people like to blame the old generation, like, oh, man, y'all let the kids do this
mm.
outrageous. But at a certain point, it definitely is on us because I think it's because, the things we see, the influences we have nowadays, the culture right now. This is our
Yeah,
culture. This is what we made the culture right now. And this is what we're focused on. And at this current time point, that's what my generation glorifies. That's what we like. That's all we know right now. And I think it definitely does have us. There's definitely a certain point where we all got to sit with ourselves and be like, all right, this is us right here. This is on us. How are we going to change the narrative? But a lot of
Mm,
people don't want to change the narrative too. There's people that, stay away, stay out the way, low key. People my age, I know some. But then there's a lot of people who love doing stuff like this.
mm.
They don't want nothing
Yeah,
else but this. And
yeah,
that's the issue, I feel like. If you could change my generation's mindset for perhaps we can change the issue that's going on. But it's only a growing problem more and more, I
yeah.
see. And the next question that leads me to my next question. How would you plan to decrease the crime rate hypothetically if you were in the position to do so? What could you do that you think would help the issue?
Yeah, man. I appreciate that question. And if I'm being transparent, like, and I agree with you on what you said, like just how you said, like it's on us. I feel the same way, right? So it's not like if I was in a position, I am in a position. That's how I feel when
Hmm.
I show up every day, like to come to a school to teach. That's frontline work, right? That's
Of
what's
course.
required because it is a battlefield out there. I
Yeah.
grew up in it, was raised in it,
Right.
made it out of it, right? So I feel like I've been called to go back in. Like that's the purpose. It's like if I can make it out, and that was like the difference between some good decisions and some bad decisions, right?
Right.
And the support of a few other people that got me out or got me to where I am now. It's like I want to be able to go back and serve, 10 more Dexters or 10 more young
Hmm.
people who will become Mr. Hooks or, Miss such and such to
Right.
have that purpose that I had once I was able to make it out. So, like, tangibly, I think it does require a lot of conversations with young people. And I think it requires a lot of examples, right? So, one of the things that I recall happening to me, and I went here too. So, there was some leadership and there were some opportunities that we had to actually see people who were taking care of business, right? So, in order for us to be able to change and choose something else other than violence or begin to love other things, you have to see them, you got to hear them, you got to have those experiences. And for me, we were inviting, man, DC leaders into our building, and they were wanting to just listen and answer questions we had for them as young 13, 14, 15-year olds. And they were the ones who had the seat of power by way of their job, right? So people working as like council members in DC,
Hmm.
people working in like, yeah, the mayor's office, people working in local businesses. They were able to come here, hear us out, and then obviously, articulate some things that we were thinking that were incorrect, and then let us know how like reality is once you do become an adult and you're a tax-paying citizen and what that looks
Right.
like versus going down the line of being a criminal,
Hmm.
losing your voice, being incarcerated, and now just living at the whim of someone else. So like for me to show up every day and transform the mind and drop those seeds and be the example,
Right.
that's the work that I'm doing from my role. But we need more people to come in on that too.
Right. And that leads me into just one question so we can kind of get a perspective here.
Yeah.
What part of DC are you from, Mr.
I'm from
Hooks?
Mayfair, Ward 7. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Northeast, Northeast, man. Across the street from Chavez, if y'all don't know.
Right.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Born
S-
and raised there,
So
man.
you would say you were seeing the trying times of this area and just the different things that have come from it, right?
Yeah, of course, of course. My family still lives there. My brothers, my grandma, right? And you know where your grandma stay, that's where
Of
you at.
course. Yeah,
So
yeah.
like, yeah, that's very much so been something that's not too distant from like who I was in the early stage of development. And I always speak to that. Like I'm
Right,
not the same person that I am today that I was when I was running the streets, doing my thing.
right. Of course. Okay, thank you for that. Now my next question is, now this is going to touch more on the homicide part of things.
Hmm.
This is where we're going to really start going to the root of the, or well, I guess one of the root of the issues where the leading factor is where most of these crimes are coming from. So now more than 90% of the homicide victims and suspects in 2019 and 2020 were males. Why do you think this is?
Ah, these are good questions. But again, for me, I think about the complexity of it all, and it's different reasons. Like
Right.
one of the things that you see is just the encounters, especially among men. Right, we have to be able to understand how to just manage conflict.
Hmm.
Right, and if we don't learn that value or that skill, it can go any which way. So
Of
it's not
course.
that it's necessarily like all gang violence that's leading to the homicide of males, like either becoming a murderer or being murdered,
Right.
right?
Of course.
It could be conflict. I'm
Mhm.
driving my car real fast, cut somebody off, fender bender, right?
Mhm.
So I might be upset that my car just got hurt, and I'm driving. I was speeding or doing my thing.
Right.
I'm upset, and when I get out of that car, I'm encountering someone else who's equally upset that I was driving like a fool. But the managing of the conflict, that's what we don't have. We can't get out the car with a air of patience and seek understanding. It immediately, the first thing we'll hear or see is somebody's face, right?
Mhm.
Face of a black man sometimes can be scary, even to black men. We on guard when we see each other. That's just what it is
Right.
until you speak,
Mhm.
and then how we speak is forceful. It's a tone. And if I'm frustrated, it comes out easily in that expression. And if I don't know you, I'm not really listening to understand. I'm on guard first. And that can lead to some bigger issues, man. So it's not just all gang violence, but that is another one. Hood beef. It's a lot that goes into it, but it can be really rooted to like a lack of patience, a lack of certain skills that we need as men that's really producing like the high level of homicide or really just violence and death that we see amongst brothers. That's what I feel is one of the major things that's
Mhm.
missing.
And to touch back on what you said, as far as just the tone and just how we talk
Yeah,
and
yeah,
how
yeah,
we
yeah.
mediate issues, I think a lot of that goes into like you hop out that car, you come into this person with an angry tone and the way you're talking to them. They hopping out the car too. They probably going back and forth with you, but
Yeah,
they hear your
immediately.
tone of voice
Hmm.
and they take that some type of way, and then that leads into something else. Now it's a bigger
Right.
issue than initially just the, oh, you slapped my car.
Yeah.
Now it turns into, oh, now you disrespecting me and you hit my car, and it
Yeah.
just keeps going on from
Right.
there. It's these moments between us as black men,
Yeah.
and to be honest, as far as like the gang culture and all this stuff, DC doesn't really have gangs like how
No, 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 not
LA
not not
and
traditionally.
Cali, not traditional gangs like
Yeah,
Colors,
for
but
sure.
we have people who rep streets,
Yeah,
blocks, and
yeah.
stuff
You rep
here,
your hood.
rep
Hmm.
your hood.
That's
But
real.
past that, and even underneath it, you got people who are, you know what I'm saying, hurt because of family members caught up in that lifestyle, or this
Hmm.
person's family member got killed. Now they get into that lifestyle and they want to hurt them same people who hurt them, and it's like a cycle, and it
Yeah.
just keeps repeating. And I see it more and more, just younger kids getting ushered into that lifestyle. Oh,
Yeah.
your father got killed behind this. Now you got to get into it and get back out there and put in work
Yeah.
behind his name. It's like a
Or,
lot.
or even it breaks down to like you hear the rumors
Right.
of because of like where your father got killed or even where a family member was killed, or even it gets to a point of like, okay, we start to identify who could have possibly committed that crime
And now
without
you
even
want to,
having the facts though. It's
and
all based on assumption and emotion.
then
So again, a part of managing conflict is being able to understand the situation that your relative was in, and also being able to understand the decisions and lifestyle your relative was living.
of
Because if you're
course.
living a certain lifestyle, I mean, how I was raised and how I understood it is that there's a code here, right? There's some expectations, although they were negative, right? They were still there and clear,
Right.
and you knew what you were getting yourself involved in if you were to go like really get deep into some of what happens in the neighborhoods, right?
Definitely.
And that's what's missing. We don't have the patience even internally. We're just moving off of the fact that, and it's grief, really. That's a
Yes.
huge thing. You talk about this cycle. That cycle
Pain
is
and
grief. and
grief.
and
Yeah.
again, we're under resourced when it comes to under resourced and underskilled when it comes to managing
Hmm.
grief, managing
Right.
life and death. Because one, life is tough.
It's
I don't
tough,
want to just skip over that when we talk about like crime rate in general,
but we.
but life is tough. The reason somebody puts
Mhm.
themselves in a position to murder somebody in a robbery is
Yeah.
because they were trying to rob them for something to satisfy their own life or lifestyle. So it's a
Man.
lot of things again in this complex like conversation that we're having.
Hmm.
But that main thing for me is like how we are able to manage just the different things that pop up, right?
Right.
Manage the different encounters with people, manage the lifestyles that we're committing to, and really like pushing to make the decisions that will lead you to a better life, right? Even if I'm in, go back to that car accident situation. If I hop out of my car, and I've been in an accident like 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago, I'm on my way. It's early, DC traffic. Somebody is speeding. I'm on Southern Avenue, South Capitol Street, speeding, and I'm jumping over, and they speed like they're coming straight, and ended up taking a left. right? So what do? I'm driving and I hit my brakes, but the car in front of me had stopped and hit their brakes because someone was crossing the street.
Right.
So my car hits them, right? Accidents. We pull over to the side and I'm frustrated. I'm just like anybody else would. I'm like, yo, an
Of
accident,
course.
I'm sick, right? I'm upset.
Mhm.
But the things that I've learned as a young man in my development to a grown man, it's like yo, you have to let that out, but I don't have to let that out
On
towards
that
anyone
person
else,
necessarily,
right? And
right?
I think sometimes we quick to move, and even in that situation, if I would have jumped out the car yelling, screaming, like that person may have seen me, and what would be good conflict resolution or even just managing conflict is if he waits by his car and let me get that off my chest. I could be saying crazy stuff. Dang, you crazy person, always speeding, man. This car, man, what you done? Like that don't necessarily mean I'm talking to this person,
Right.
right? I'm just getting it off my chest. So on both sides, you have to be willing to make a conscious decision, and that requires a lot of patience. And it requires for me to say, all right, what's the best situation for like me to be safe, and for me not to put myself in a position to harm this person.
Of
So
course.
like it does it's so complex, man. But I'm not the
Definitely.
type to blame anybody else. I am very understanding of like the development stages of young men, young black men in our communities in DC. And I realize that there are some things that are missing as far as skills that
Uh,
we need for like self-preservation and for protection of our community members, which includes other black men.
I 100% agree on that because there's levels to stuff like this, consequences, all the things that go
Yeah,
into it
yeah,
behind that. It's
yeah.
definitely
To those
levels.
numbers you're talking about.
It's definitely levels to it. And what I would like to ask you next is, do males commit more crime than females?
Man, yeah, I would love to see the data on that. I mean, I think both men and women are crazy. We got our own crazy thing with humanity going on, but I think obviously, um, the expression of crime it shows up in different ways
Right.
with like petty crime,
Hmm.
but it could be something simple as like assault, right?
Right.
Like,
Of
it's,
course.
it's things like that where it's like okay, like I don't see too many men like immediately putting their hands on somebody like I do with some young ladies, which again can lead
Right.
to further consequences, like you mentioned earlier. But like also like it's hard to call, but I
Hmm.
think the root of it for men and women, because like I don't I don't think that men are the only ones who are out here on this extreme level of like violence or frustration. I see a lot of young ladies who are adopting that same energy as a young man. I teach them. I'm like, hold on. I be having
Uh,
to remind some of
a
my
lot of
young
more
ladies.
masculine women
Yeah, I'm like, I gotta
nowadays.
remind you of who you are, young lady.
Yeah, in my
Right?
generation especially, it's a lot of more
Yeah,
masculine women.
right.
I
So
will
like,
have to give it to you
and
on
I
that.
don't know if that's directly like producing like criminal behavior by young ladies, but I do recognize like in our current condition, it's like, yeah, there's some bad choices being made, no matter the gender, right? So that's what I
Definitely.
see. That's what I see.
Right. And as to my next question, I would like to ask you now is, what do you think about the homicide and closure rates, with the homicide numbers being as much as 203 and the closure being 62%?
What do you mean, like closure, like identifying?
Like closure being like just the s- cases being solved, or just like being able to identify certain factors. Like, are these cases being solved, or just identifying
Yeah,
what went wrong, what happened, like just the case solved, case shut type thing, closure
yeah,
rates.
yeah. For me, it's challenging, but like I think I'm grateful that I've been able to like travel. I've been able to travel, going to university, going to Tennessee State,
Right,
all the way down there. That was my university. To see that man, these things are not uncommon. Again, it's certain parts of this conversation breaks my heart. But to see how common certain crimes are in Black communities, it's something that I was able to kind of internalize. And then you have to realize, okay, how do we or who are we depending on for these solutions, right?
right,
And when I think about the job even of a police officer or an investigator in DC, we got a lot of black officers in DC, by the way, right? So
right.
it's not like a color thing, right?
Of course.
It's not like white people are just saying, "Oh yeah, we don't care about black criminals or black murders or anything like that." That's not the case in DC. It's hard to argue that. But what
Hmm.
we do see, and what I've seen in different cities who are, I would say, chastised with the same types of narratives, that it's a difficult job, right? When you think about the lack of relationship
Right.
that communities have with police. There's been a lot of protests around in the last decade, but when you think about the lack of relationship there, it's going to be hard to solve crimes. Like these people weren't there; they're not familiar with the neighborhood or the community. They don't know the history of, like, let's say, hood beef or confrontation between people. It's not a lot of ears that they have to the ground, right?
Hmm.
And obviously, we then have to assume responsibility. And I
Right.
don't think that we look at um, the pathway, or I don't think we look at what a solution is the same way as police or investigators.
Definitely.
Um, Not on a large scale, but you do have families who view justice in a certain way. Justice for one family may be, hey, I want that person to be found and to go to jail.
Right.
Justice for other families is like, eye for an eye, life for a life. I want that person to die,
Or I want them to
right?
feel this pain
I
that I'm
want I want
feeling.
them to feel this pain. So there's no like set of like a common understanding of what happens when you see murder, or when that experience happens in a family. And I
Hmm.
think that is just, again, something that we have to target with like just community conversations. I think we have to get better at not just representing the same neighborhood, but also represent the same values in that neighborhood, like the
Right.
good ones, right? Because we do
Of
represent
course.
some common values, but they're negative and they're easily accessible. It's easy to grab one of those. But
Right.
at one point in history, we had strong values
Hmm.
from neighbor to neighbor, from house to house. That if
Right.
there was confrontation, there was a mediator or someone, some relationship in between those homes or families where there could be a solution that arises, right? And that solution was oftentimes not pointed back at violence towards, that neighbor or that community member. We've lost touch on that because we've lost touch with each other. So
Yes.
yeah, yeah, it breaks
Definitely.
my heart to hear those numbers, but solutions and accountability. So the solutions are going to come as a product of accountability.
Hmm.
Um, but government, police, yeah, they still have a role to play. They got some power, they got some influence, they got some dollars, right? And they
Yep.
have control over other systems that again allow for that to happen, when there can be some things invested in, put in place that would drive, again, what relationships, economic success, and just general good community health.
I agree with you on that one. And what I would like to ask you next, as a follow up to this question,
Yeah.
is like, what does it take to close a case? What do you think it takes to close a case?
Wow, man, that's one that got me thinking. Let me see. Like, if I was an investigator, I'm trying to close a case. Um, and one, I think it's all about being visible. And I know when we think about police investigators, it's usually, here's how it's usually set up. It's usually a lot less law enforcement officers available than there is people in the population, right? So you're
Right.
already, if I'm trying to solve crimes, I'm already like behind the eight ball because it's a lot more of them, potential people who've committed that crime, than it is people who are trying to solve it. So for me, I think you have to like work in systems that reduce that ratio, right? Use it in your advantage. You got to employ more people. You got to incentivize people. Not, and I'm not saying like go and get your like star snitcher campaign. You know
Right.
what I'm saying?
Of course. No, not
But what I am saying is, if I'm an officer or an investigator, I'm familiar with the people in the community, where we're to a point, we're to a point in which that they trust me and I'm trustworthy. So I'm not just rubbing shoulders and connecting with people just to figure out crime. I'm also rubbing shoulders because I'm trying to be proactive and stop people from committing crimes. So again, like once it happens, man, it's like it's random if you can actually solve it, unless obviously it's blatant. You got like technology and cameras around, but
right.
again, those things are not really found in our neighborhoods. Some people don't want them in our neighborhoods, but
Of
like
course.
you gotta have a lot of proactive strategies if you're gonna really solve this issue, man, or close some of the cases.
But I guess to continue on, do you think jail is an appropriate punishment for first time offenders? Like, say this is my first crime ever. Is jail inappropriate?
Yes, absolutely. Go to jail.
Okay.
Absolutely. Nah, I'm playing. What it depends on the crime for me, right? And if you're talking about like some like harsh crime, criminal activity, criminal behavior, yeah, go to jail. Absolutely, I'm for that. Get up off the streets because you're too comfortable,
Right.
right? And even people can be comfortable in like with nothing,
Right.
right? And that's the problem. It's like you're comfortable in this space where you're now willing to commit a heinous crime against somebody else. I
Hmm.
don't think that you are in the right mindset if you're willing to make that decision. I do think jail is probably the best immediate alternative. But what happens in jail, that's where the trouble for me is. If you are incarcerated, there should be a just system that helps support you to not produce what we call recidivism. As in, I let you go, and then you do the same thing that leads you right back to jail again.
Right.
So our jailing or our incarceration system is broken, right? And that it works. Some people will argue that it works. It does what it's supposed to do, right?
Right.
It chains people and keeps them chained for life. But
Hmm.
if we're talking about a strong and legitimate justice system, when people are incarcerated, they have access to the things they need to live a good life once they are back out on the streets,
Hmm.
right? That's classes, that's opportunities for education and immediate ones. That's jobs or job training. Those are immediate ones. That may be change of location because once you're in the hood and you've been there all your life, that is the problem. You're
Right.
comfortable there. And that could be even as we talk about now, we I think about some of these ideas of what helped me grow and make better decisions because I've committed criminal activities and I can be honest about that. Haven't been convicted about that. I'm not saying this is heinous crime either, but my involvement in my neighborhood when there's nothing there is more than likely criminal behavior.
Right.
What helped me to stay on the straight path or at least to make it out
Hmm.
because my senior year I had a case open. I was going to court. At the
Right.
same time, still trying to go to class so I can graduate and go to college.
Right.
But that door would have been shut if that judge would have said, "Hey, yeah, jail first time." Like, okay, doesn't matter. But
Indeed.
for me, I had people in my corner, mentors, had resources,
Hmm.
right? Had guidance, and I think that is not what you see when people get locked up. I don't think probation officers, and I ain't knocking probation officers. I am challenging the system though on what those check-ins actually look like, what support actually looks like if I'm unemployed. I committed this crime. My resume may not be nothing, right? I may not even
Right.
have a resume. Do I have the system in place that'll help me to make better decisions as a young person, as a citizen, and not be immediately labeled as a criminal, right? I should be labeled as a person who needs dire help,
Right.
right? Because that's what criminal behavior for me is. It's like if somebody is crying out for something, and we have to do a better job of supporting those needs that are missing instead of letting people turn to, their own mind or the wickedness of their heart.
Definitely. And to kind of go off of that, what do you think the appropriate sentencing should be for like a first time offender or just anybody in general?
Dang, you getting deep here. I mean, for me, it's always nuanced. I mean, you think about again, I always lean onto like what was the actual crime,
Crime, of course.
like not even like the impact of it, but what was the actual crime? And here's my political answer, I guess. Whatever it is, it needs to be consistent, right?
Hmm.
And communicated, right? And
Right.
this goes back to like so many systemic errors, even with education. Like when we have scholars who graduate and don't understand the consequence of like the laws if they break them in their community. That should be a reality that if you know that you're graduating and I don't know, you're engaged in criminal behavior or if you're around that, you should know that okay, here's my informed decision. If I go out and rob somebody, if I go out and steal from a store, if I go out and I assault someone or at worst, murder someone, if I go out and I'm doing these things, if I'm selling drugs illegally, right? If I go out and
Right.
I'm doing these things, I should be aware of the consequence the first time I do it, right? The consequence the second
Right.
time I do it, the consequence the third time I do it. Because my father and my uncles, man, I used to say that they used to be career convicts, man. They spent a lot of time in jail. So they worked. They taught me through this process of what happens and when and what led to them continuing to make some of the decisions they were making. It was really just an ignorance of the justice system, an ignorance of opportunity and education. So for me, like whatever the sentence is, I think it needs to be consistent and I think it needs to be well known through education in your community. You got to know your rights, but also know the consequences if you're breaking laws out here. And I don't know. I just would hope that the first offense will be fair.
Right. Well, okay, let's move on to the next question. I think that's a good place to really end off that topic. Thank you for that. Now, to go into the next question, of
Mhm.
course, according to the Metropolitan Police Department, in 2021, the number of recovered firearms was around 2,000. 2000 and about like 310, I believe. What is the process of recovering firearms that you know of?
Yeah, well, the process of recovering firearms is this like illegal weapons or registered? Legal firearms you talking about?
I'm definitely uh,
We can
inclined to
assume.
believe what they're implying is that they
Mhm.
were definitely illegal
Right,
because if they were legally owned, I'm pretty sure they would turn those back over if everything checks out.
right.
So these must all be illegally owned firearms,
Yeah,
of
yeah.
course.
Just the only thought that comes to my mind is like, okay, let's say somebody has a legal firearm yet still commits a crime.
Right.
Did they take that firearm and recover it from them and cancel
Hmm.
their license or something like that? But
Right.
assuming that it is illegal firearms being recovered, one, that's crazy. That number is
Very
I
high.
the numbers are high, man, and I hope y'all listen on this podcast. Like those are, I think these are some of the questions that even the people who are paid to do this job don't have answers to. So I'm not gonna sit and say, hey, I'm the expert on what it takes to get illegal firearms off the street.
Right. Definitely.
But I think again, just me sharing from my experience, I think the number one thing that we have to pursue first, anyway, is education.
Of
Is
course.
education, man. How do we begin to have education um, put at the forefront? And when I say education, I don't mean like schoolwork, y'all. Like when I say education, I mean like information. Like we have to inform our neighborhoods and our communities on issues like this. Like imagine we as a school, right? Let's say we're the entity. If we have opportunities to communicate out into the local neighborhoods these types of numbers,
Right.
I think that would trigger a conversation and a response from people who are in the communities that we're talking about,
Right.
right? And also, I think one of the simple solutions for me, and I got this from a seventh grader last year: pay people, pay people to turn the guns in. And I'm thinking, here's my thinking on this: the guns are coming, they get here illegally.
Right.
And I think that it would be a really good opportunity to take advantage of a broken system if you encourage people fairly and justly to turn illegal guns in. You can get paid, right? Get paid
Definitely.
for that.
Definitely. Of
And that's
course.
again, it's already a system that's broken, and I don't have a solution for how guns are getting to into the neighborhoods illegally. I don't know that. I don't know where that gap is. But
Right.
if they are available and accessible, make it an incentive to actually turn them in, and hopefully you have people then who are less likely to use them for
Hmm.
something heinous because now they have an economic incentive, right?
Right.
If I'm paying people a certain amount, and I don't know what that number is, that'll get people to turn their gun in, right? But
Hmm.
if I'm paying people a certain amount to do that, then that potentially would get people who, let's say, aren't using guns for heinous reasons, that will potentially get them out the streets or at least to stay out the way. And that may not be the same solution for somebody who is just, has a gun for protection, right? Who
Right.
has a gun because of the nature of their neighborhood or conflict from their neighborhood and another. So it's not a one size fits all. But for me, it's like, yo, if you got guns on the streets and you don't want them and you can't identify who has them, but you see that when you find them, it's a high number, man. If you
Of
want to work
course.
to solve that problem, you gotta invest in the community, and that's one unique way of investing back into the community if you want them to, move.
Forward, as
Yeah,
in terms of that. Okay.
for
Yes.
sure, for sure. And in that conversation, even when you're turning your gun in, perhaps now I can deliver some opportunities for you to share just some more information about resources or what you can do with that money I'm giving you. If
Right.
it's 1,500, if it's 3,000 for a base minimum handgun, what can you do with this $3,000, right?
Right.
To stabilize your living situation, right? That would just be crazy to me.
And now my next question is in terms of as to the firearms.
Yeah,
What happens to these firearms after they are recovered? Where do we go from there? Is my next question to you.
man. I mean, you mean like with the people who's recovering
Just and when they're recovered in general,
them?
where do we go from there with those recovered firearms?
Yeah, yeah, man. That's a very interesting question. I don't know. I think for me, I'm not quite sure what you do with them, right? Because you're not putting them back on the streets, right? And if they are like illegal firearms, I'm not sure the process of getting them registered or auctioned off to a firearms dealer. I don't know if they broken down, melted, recycled. I have no clue on where to go with that one. But it's an interesting question. What what do you do with the firearms that are recovered? I mean, I guess if you're trying to, oh, if they recovered illegally, I think that's the part of an investigator's job to figure out, okay, where are we tracking the material
Right.
that created this firearm, and then try to put your little map together and track down who's responsible for,
No, definitely.
putting firearms out illegally. And there's a few documentaries I saw. I'm gonna leave that alone. I'm gonna leave that alone. I'm gonna leave that alone today.
Of course, but
But just do some research for y'all out there and take a look at some of the information that has been discovered on like where certain firearms have come from in the past and from who.
definitely, I agree with that. I can agree with that right there. Just as long as they properly disposed of, that's how I look at
Yeah,
that.
yeah, that's
Just
good.
they properly disposed of. Y'all do whatever y'all do with them, of course. You know, as long as they put somewhere they need to be put,
Yeah,
they get above the streets. But moving on to the next question. Now, this is on the subject of just ways to help. And now the question's going to start off like this, Mr. Hooks. So, how do you plan on changing the crime rate stats? Or is there anything you're currently doing now to help, in your opinion?
yeah, that's good. For me personally, just being a regular person, because I ain't got no title, ain't got no like real power. But in my daily life, one thing I try to do is take a stance against it. I try to articulate to people in my family and young people, just generally, how it's not the way to go. Playing with firearms is not a game. Getting involved in certain activities with firearms is not a game. Um, Articulating that, like just in my regular everyday,
Mm.
bringing up again some of these numbers or retelling some stories in a not in a way that glorifies what's taking place. Because I think again that's what the opposite end is doing. It's like, oh, you hear about some crime that took place and we puff that up and we're encouraging it like it's a good thing, like you get your badge of honor if you was shooting or spinning the block on somebody. And I'm like, yeah, now you don't want those problems.
Right.
So for me, I think I have to share that, um, and it's a part of my testimony. So 2 years ago, my mom was killed. Right, gun violence in my own neighborhood.
Oh, wow.
So it's real to me. So when I speak to certain things, and this is even before that took place, I used to say, I hate the streets, but I love my hood. But I
Right.
hate the streets, right? And I hate it with a passion. And only, this event would then transpire, which caused me to double down on that,
On that,
on those feelings.
and it probably definitely hit hard.
On those feelings. Yeah, I doubled down on that sentiment. When I left the hood, I was through with it, done with it. I wasn't necessarily done with the people, but like all of the interactions and culture, those values that I said was negative earlier, I was I hated my heart for it. So me just coming back home 2 years ago, my mom was killed about 4 months after that by way of a firearm. And again, I'm in that situation where there has been no closure for my family. There's been no closure,
Like,
right?
you don't
So
even
so
know who
again,
did it?
that don't know. But here's
It's terrible,
the
man.
decision I had to make, right? And this is a little side tangent story. Like the decision I had to make was one that challenged me as a human, right? Dealing with grief. So I understand where people are coming from when they want to immediately react and make someone else feel how they felt. But the truth that I understood is I don't know who did it. I don't know who pulled the trigger. And if I found out, more than likely to be somebody who I'm familiar with, who I know, who I grew up with, because it happened in my own neighborhood, right? And
Right.
from the information that I got from the police or investigators, is the direction my mom was standing in the direction that the bullet actually flew. It wasn't somebody else who came around shooting before, right? But the bullet was pulled from a gun that was triggered by somebody from my own community. It's like those are the things that we really got to wrestle with, and I wouldn't wish that situation on anybody. I still wrestle with it today, but with
Of
knowing where
course.
I want to go with life, every single decision I make, like is now for like my son and my twins, who I told you got twins on the way. My wife
Right.
is like, yo, I will have to make decisions that lead to more life for Mr. Hooks instead of me throwing my life away in the name of my mom or my loved one who I care deeply for. And at times and at days, it's like, yo, I know I'm willing and wanting to just throw my life away because it doesn't really matter. Those are the managing of internal conflict that I got to deal with. So like my daily communication with my family and with strangers, guns ain't nothing to play with. Like that's
Right.
you don't want to see,
Of
you don't want to be
course.
a part of that. And if you're not arguing for people to put guns down, you they always talk about like not saying anything is worse or is just as bad as doing the bad thing. If you stand by and watch people like do things that are heinous, commit crimes, and you don't check them on that. And these the people who are your neighbors, who you roll with and who ride with you, quote unquote. It's like, yo, no, that's not helpful at all. So I just try to advocate for what's right, for what makes sense, and share my testimony. Honestly, I think that's what I do as a regular person. And if more of us would do that, even you as a young person, articulate to your friends who are becoming of age and has access to, choosing that different lifestyle and picking up a gun, it's like, yeah, yeah, nah, man, it's a better way to do it. Not just to say, oh, nah, I'm not going to pick up a gun, right? That's you. But if you're trying to preserve and change these numbers and impact your community and have that influence, you do have it by simply having conversations and tapping into other people's conscience.
I definitely in my everyday life with people I just know who do that or are in those current participate in those type of activities. I try to be like, listen, I don't see it having a good end for you.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's good.
My I have cousins, just people who participate in that. They're either dead or currently in jail,
Yeah,
fighting charges right now, and they've been caught with some serious stuff. So I'm like, I've seen where it gets you. Like
right.
a cousin of mine got killed in the club. He was out with his friends. He was a real thorough person. He all
Right.
he did was work and stay in the house. But his friends convinced
Out
him
the
to
way,
come
out the
out.
way.
He was out the way. But his friend convinced him to come out to a club that he was hosting at. He was like, "Hey, you gotta come out." And you know what I'm saying? He was like, I don't do something. I don't do anything much. So I'm gonna come out. He came out, altercation happened, and unfortunately he was shot and killed. And that is currently something
Wow.
one of my uncles is dealing with,
Wow.
one of his oldest child, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Definitely hurts to lose one of your oldest kids because it's like a lot of time you can't get back. And
Yeah.
I would first like to say congratulations to you with your twins.
Hey, I
Fatherhood,
appreciate that.
fatherhood is a beautiful
Yeah,
thing.
it changes you. Yes, sir.
I've definitely seen it. My uncles and just my father, just the struggles and different things you go through with fatherhood. But it is a beautiful process, I think, and just trusting in it. That is something I definitely
Yeah.
look forward to one day
Let's
when I
go.
find
One
the
day.
right woman, of course.
One day later. One day later.
One day
Not
later.
too soon.
No, 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 not too soon.
Not
No
too
time
soon,
soon, brother.
please.
But when that day comes, I can't wait for the journey I'll go on
Yeah.
when I get to that point, if I get to that point. And I would just like to next say my condolences to your mother. I know that probably must be a lot. I can't even imagine losing my mother, but I know if I did, it would definitely change me forever. I would never be the same. Especially the
Yeah.
gun violence. No, I would be forever upset, always looking.
Yeah. Yeah. It's tough. It's
It
tough.
would definitely would make me become a different man. You know, Um, I just
Yeah.
find it amazing that you're able to find the ways to cope with that because I know it must not be easy day to
Yeah.
day
No.
being without your mother in such a unnatural way. While again, it is natural for us to bury our parents, we shouldn't have to bury them from something like that. I definitely.
Yeah. And it's not easy, It's just like I just like, I give glory to God, one, for the transformation he's done in my life. And then like everything that he's done for me to like get to that moment. I'm not saying like he ordained it or nothing that happens. But I can trust him what happens next.
Right,
So like I literally had to just plant myself and root myself in just the core values that I have, especially spiritually,
right,
to be able to manage conflict at that level,
of course.
you know, grief at that level, and it just continues to happen, man. So like that's what I mean when I say like the power in your testimony is sharing, right? Not just like, hey, I don't think this the right thing you should be doing, right? Like that's good, but also asking people what it is that they need. What do you need in this moment? Because I hear what you're saying, and I understand why you're thinking that way. I understand why you want to pick up a firearm. Or if you got beef, I get that, right? Well, you got to pick up a firearm to think you got to, go and do something to someone else. I understand where you're coming from
Well, they
because
might,
I understand the condition. Again, I've seen it in like 4 or 5 different states,
right,
right, with black men specifically. But asking that question and then seeing how you can help someone else satisfy that need will go a long way in the thoughts that a person would have and in their decision making. So that's the power we can use as regular people, and I know for sure that's something that I've had people even to this day asking me those questions to help me to continue to grieve, to help my family, to continue to work through something that is just now a new reality. So yeah, that helps bring some of the peace that's necessary
right, right. Thank you for that.
for
So
sure.
my next question to you is, and you kind of already answered the question in a way, but to kind of put it out there, how has this journey been for you? Is it difficult for you personally or not? Like, how would you describe your journey so far, just from where you've been at to now? Do you think the progress is good? Do you think the progression has been, something remarkable? How would you describe your progression?
Yeah, I mean, man, I'm a humble dude, but I do say, like, I would say it's been, man, it's I think it's what it's supposed to be, right? So
Right,
like, there's nothing that's gonna come easy, right? There's nothing that's gonna come easy. From when I was, I don't know, 13, middle school, like around that age when you really get involved. I've been younger than that, but when you get involved in the things and you know it's not right. Like I knew, um, I don't know, I knew selling drugs in my neighborhood wasn't right, but that didn't lead me to avoid selling drugs, right?
right,
So like when you see the opportunity to escape or to change when everybody else, when your whole neighborhood, when your whole culture is this, and that's what's cool, and that's what people are known to do, and that's what's successful. You see some
right,
people, quote unquote, successful doing these things. Like it's never easy to do the opposite of that, to
right,
walk a different path. Because normally, and what I've experienced is that I've had to walk that alone, right? And you don't only you. So you're gonna walk it how you can only walk it. But
yeah,
there is something special about going on that journey and then having encounters of other individuals who are walking their path, right?
right.
Choosing positivity, choosing life, right? Choosing something greater than
Choosing
what they had
peace.
that was terrible yesterday,
Right,
right? Choosing peace, right?
right,
There's something great about that that makes it all worthwhile. So for me, it's been challenging, but I didn't expect anything less. When I say, "Hey, I'm gonna make it about the hood. I'm gonna do it, and I'm gonna do it my way, right? And I don't care who's coming with me, but I can't be another, statistic of a black man locked up, a black man buried in the grass. I
uh,
can't go out without a fight.
of
If I go
course,
to jail, it's gonna be because I was trying to save every other black man who I knew in my life who was wilding out, right? But
of
do something
course.
crazy for them, trying to get them out. But
Or
like,
just your family, just
now
in
I feel the
general.
same way about my sons. Like if I go to jail, it's probably gonna be something with me trying to give my son a better life than I had. Positively though. Like I'm
Of
talking about like
course.
going and shutting down the school or something, his kindergarten class because they're wilding on his education. Like that's what I'm going to court for. Right? And they lock
Right,
me up because I'm too loud, so be it. But like those are the things you have to like look at. And for me, I've had those encounters that I can recall that's made this journey worthwhile so far.
right,
And now I got hope that it's going to be even better in the years to come because of the foundation that I've been able to set for myself, my family, my cousins, my brothers, my sons, my grandchildren once they get here, right? In a couple, decades, like I feel as though it's all worthwhile and it truly is just remarkable. This journey, challenging, but anybody can do it. That's what's crazy. It's challenging, but anybody can do it. It takes that level of commitment. It takes a strong, positive community, and then you can be looking back like, "Wow, I can't believe it's not even you." Other people gonna be like, "Oh, that's Mr. Hooks." Like y'all call him Mr. Hooks. I get it all the time. I got kids who I
right,
teach. Oh, I used to, I used to hang out, and I still do that. My friends, I hang out with their uncles or their older brothers. Some of my friends, they kids go to Chavez.
right.
And now, like, they see my name on a report card or a progress report, and it's like, yo, what? Let me tell you about your teacher. But I love how kids are able to talk about who I am now and share back, that vision and that hope,
Right.
um, and just that lifestyle that I have. Because sometimes, you talk to people your age and they don't want to hear it. When they hear it from someone else, a young person or older person, is just another seed that can be planted. And again, it helps change some life decisions. Remarkable.
Yeah, that's the goal. That's the idea.
Yeah.
But I guess to wrap things up, I first want to leave off with a statement to the people and everyone. Basically, for people watching, I want to ask you all, what are some ways they can help stop gun violence in their own community? How long would it take for them to get the response from the people? And really, just what can everyone do around your area? Basically, I want to challenge the people to do more and to find ways to come together and fix these issues. That's my general statement to the people. And I would just like to really just thank Mr. Hooks for coming on here talking with us, to share some of his knowledge and experience and the things he's been through in his life to help us kind of paint a picture and a narrative for everyone to think about, food for thought. I would like to thank him
Sure, for
coming
sure.
from it. And is there any message you would like to leave off with to everyone watching or who may see this?
Dang. Well, one shout out to you, Mr. Bennett. Haha. Like one day they're gonna call him Mr. Bennett, and you're gonna be comfortable with that.
I'm already comfortable with it
Oh,
now.
all right, let's go, let's go, let's go. I would say just to my community, that's out there that's listening to Chavez, my DC community, and just wherever you are in the world, go global with this. Um, man, just know that change can happen, right? Truly can be done. Like there is a solution for violence and crime in your community, but the solution truly change. It truly starts with you.
Right.
That little conversation you have, those discussions that you drum up at your family gatherings, or when you're just shooting a breeze with a friend, those check-ins. All of those things make a difference. And just continue to be a part of the solution by having those conversations and challenging the people with position and power to actually bring some real solutions, not standing idly by, not sitting, not waiting, but getting active in your neighborhood. Like we say at Chavez, man, changing the community starts with us.
Definitely. And I would just like to thank you for taking the time out of your day to join us on the Chavez Loud and Proud podcast. This is a very important conversation, especially for young people. And, you know, thank you for coming on here. We hope to see you all again. We hope everyone watching enjoyed the new episode. If you did, leave a like and comment. Really just, you know what I'm saying, share this with those who you may think need to hear this or think that this can be useful to. And just again, thank y'all for all y'all watching. Thanks, Mr. Hook, for coming again. Thank you for taking time. And we'll see y'all next time.